Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. Today's show is part two of a revisit with a good friend of mine. We did our first interview when we didn't know each other back in 2004. I flew to New York and interviewed Will Lee. 18 years later, we're very close friends. Will's been inducted into the Musicians Hall of Fame. And we revisit again and have another interview, this time as close friends. We talk about how he got started in being a session musician and the happenstance of what happened, which was going to be a very short TV show that ended up being 33 1/3 years long. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, part two of Will Lee. Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage and my very good friend, Will Lee. So we're just talking about, last thing we talked about was the pressure of the red light coming on.
Yeah, I think it's the old be in the moment philosophy rather than don't project, don't think back, don't think ahead, just get there, just be there, be in the moment.
That's a term that I first heard, I think maybe Michael Jordan or somebody said that, you know, he was playing a championship ball game and he was going up for a layup and it was a big game and he said, like, okay, while he's doing it, he's saying, remember this, because you're going to want to remember this the rest of your life. And in the moment, he was like suspended in kind of animation in the moment right then and videotaping it in his head, you know, forever, you know.
Wow, that's focus.
Yeah.
That's concentration.
Speaking of being in the moment, you told me a story when we first met that I have told a gazillion times.
I hope it was true.
I do too. But like I said, you've played on so many recordings, great recordings, and this is one of my all-time favorites. But would you mind? And I don't, you know, it is on our first interview, kind of, but not everybody has seen that. So, would you tell the story about when you were recording Brandy?
Brandy, You're a Fine Girl by Looking Glass?
Well, no, but
Brandy. Well, most people know it as Mandy. And it was called Brandy. We were in the studio with Barry Manilow, and he had put together a band of myself on bass, Jimmy Young on drums, I think Charlie Brown and one other guitarist on guitars, maybe a second keyboard player if I remember. I can't remember. There could have even been a percussionist there. And Barry was a big fan of the Philadelphia groove. He loved like I'll Be Around. This is our fork in the road, with the backbeats and the tom-toms. And he loved that feel, and that's how he wanted to do Mandy. And I can't remember what Mandy originally felt like. There's a British recording by the guys that wrote it. He's not the writer. And I think for that reason, he was not as into it as some of his other material, because this is not his tune, this wasn't his choice, it was something that Clive Davis brought to him, and it sort of insisted that he recorded. Mm-hmm. So we recorded that version with that Philadelphia feel, and at that point it was still Brandy, and it even said it on the sheet music, it said Brandy, which hung Barry up for a while because he kept going, accidentally singing that word, that name, until somewhere in the middle of the session, I don't know whose decision it was to change the name of it, but for the reason not that they didn't want it to be confused with the Looking Glass huge hit called Brandy, mm-hmm. They needed a new name, so they just went with Mandy, and it took them a minute to get used to it. So we're in the studio, and we have that great feeling Philadelphia groove. Now, Clive Davis, whose record company Arista office was right down the street, 57th Street. We were in a studio called Media Sound. And Clive was going to come down and take a listen to our work and sign off or whatever he was going to do. And we didn't know if he was going to, love it or have something to say about it. But what ended up happening was Barry said, okay, guys, look, everybody go in the hall, pack up slowly. The session may be over, or we may need to redo it, but for now, pack up slowly and just wait in the lobby, while Clive comes in and takes a listen. So me wanting to be a fly on the wall and realizing I wasn't going to take up too much space because everybody's in the hall, I sneaked back into the studio to see what was happening. Clive's listening along, I'm watching his face, and he's bouncing his head around. He's going, starts to shake his head no, and starts to get it, starts to lower his head and his eyes, and finally, okay, stop the tape. And oh boy, what's he going to say? And he goes, I heard this more of like a bridge over troubled waters kind of a thing. So Barry says to the guys in the hall, okay, everybody can go home except for the drums and bass. So we cut it as a trio with that really slow, I remember all my life, right? And you can almost hear Barry like gritting his teeth as he's singing, because I don't think he was that into it until it became number one, and then he was way into it after that.
I loved it when that record would come on the radio. It was, if he didn't love singing it, it didn't sound that way. It sounded like he was serious about it,
Yeah.
I mean, like he meant it,
You can go online, and now I think Barry himself or his office has posted some of the earlier takes of not the Philadelphia version, but the early versions where we're kind of messing up the take and we're stop and start, and he's going, oh, Brandy, or is it Mandy? And he's just learning how to work that Mandy word into it. So it took him a minute to get used to ignoring the actual original title. But it was a big hit. It was like I think it was his first number one song.
Yeah. Still, I'm sure that's what he probably closes the night with, or brings the house down.
It's just a beautiful. Yeah.
So there's so many of these that you've done. It's be almost redundant to keep talking about them, because there's just like when I was first opening the museum, I had not a lot of stuff to put in the museum that was relevant. We were just getting going. Nobody knew about us. I obviously was not a Ahmet Ertegun person that could pull strings and make things happen. But Will was in from the get-go, and we were getting ready to get opened, and I had this huge package come in from New York from Will, and it's still in the museum, and
I have more to give you too.
Well, I've already had some players come in that are jealous. And they're like, "Why, Will's got a whole wall," But you've got the goods to back it up, and a lot more. But gold album after platinum album after, just you kind of can watch the progression of how they went from gold records to platinum to CDs to cassettes to everything that as they changed over the.
That's funny, isn't it?
Over the years, yeah.
I appreciate you taking them, because I don't want to look at my past. I'm kind of like forward thinking. I always want to see what's next, and I don't want to sit back there digging myself, going, "Oh, look what I did,"
Yeah, but this is a museum, so
right.
People.
So thank you for including me.
And they love it, and of course the guitar, with the bass guitar and everything. And we've since added Paul right by you.
It should be.
Absolutely. And what a wonderful guy he is too.
Yeah, he's the greatest. I love
happy
Paul
to get
so
to know
much.
him,
Yeah.
and incredible musician.
Probably like you and Paul, he and I got along like gangbusters the first time we met. We've been best friends ever since.
Well, I could see that, because he's just that, like you, once you kind of meet, you feel like you've known each other forever already,
Yeah.
Like-minded, I guess, musically is.
And he's really smart, and he's quirky and funny.
Yeah.
So he keeps things moving in a very interesting kind of a Canadian's eye view. version, of reality, which is always entertaining to me.
So before we call it a day here, everybody's going to want to know about how you became part of one of the, I guess maybe the longest running late night show ever was David Letterman. You were 30, was it 30?
33 and a third years.
33?
Yeah.
How 33 and a third,
It
huh?
was, yeah. We started in February of '82 and we ended in let me think of the date. Oh, it was May 20th, 2015.
So how'd that happen?
Well, let's see. First of all, I had this great friendship with Paul.
How'd y'all meet?
We met. This was a little bit almost Barry Manilow related because Paul had met Ron Dante, who was the producer of those Barry Manilow hits. And Paul was in New York City with some play that came down from Canada, and I want to say Godspell or The Magic Show. I can't remember which one of those two. Probably The Magic Show at this point. He's in town doing this play, and he had met a guy named Paul Jabara. Paul Jabara is the guy that wrote Last Dance,
Yeah.
and co-wrote It's Raining Men with Paul. So we're in the studio, and Paul had, I guess, asked Ron Dante to be Paul had asked Ron Dante to produce some sessions with him and this guy Paul Jabara, and Ron Dante called his guys, and that I was one of those guys, And here's Paul Shaffer, who's this guy, and we liked the way each other dressed, and we had a good time talking about, humorous stuff, and it just got along really well. So that began our friendship, and then from there, we stayed in touch, and we did lots of sessions in New York together, and he's a great session player, Paul Shaffer. He always knows what to do. And he, got the Saturday Night Live gig, which I turned down because I was too busy. I couldn't do it. But he got the gig and stayed on that gig from '75 on through the first 3 or 4 years, and ended up getting really well known around New York as being this very astute, reliable, super hip, musician that could do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, a musical archivist. I'm sure you guys have had great conversations in that
He
regard.
he knows how to play every song, much less know every
It's
song.
frightening.
Yeah.
And he's got a photographic memory for any piece of music that's ever come across, his eyes or his ears. And so anyway, all these years go by, and he became really good friends with a band that I was in called the 24th Street Band. And that was Hiram Bullock, Steve Jordan, and Clifford Carter, and myself. And even during the recording of our second out of 3 albums, Paul was there on the scene hanging out with us every night in the studio, and we just all got along really great. So when early 1982 came along, Paul came up to me one day and said, listen, and by the way, this band had just broken up, this 24th Street Band. And Paul said, I got an offer to be the musical director on this upcoming pilot, which is going to be like a talk show, comedy, music show thing with this guy, David Letterman. And he said, do you want to be in the band? I want to ask you and the other 2 guys from the 24th Street Band, besides the keyboardist, because I'm going to be the keyboardist. So we'll have this ready-made situation, and the idea is to play instrumental James Brown, Beatles, and Rolling Stones and Motown stuff. And that's what I want to be the music for the show, unlike the Doc Severinsen kind of jazzy thing. And I said, great, when do we start? He goes, next week. And I go, oh my God, well, why don't we get together and start learning some songs tonight, So every night from then on, we started, he got a few charts done, and we learned a few things by some head arrangements and stuff. And, we get there and we start doing the show, and it was all very kind of like, you don't know where it's going. Everybody's sort of finding their way. The dynamic between Dave and Paul was a little weird in the beginning. Nobody really, Paul, who's a genius, he can navigate anybody. he's trying to figure out how to navigate this Letterman guy, and he's figuring out a little persona for himself that fits in some kind of way. And Dave's starting to appreciate the fact that he has somebody to bounce off of, because this guy's funny, everything he says, you know, and he's right there with something quirky and great. And so the original contract for us was 13 weeks, and I was in heaven. I've never had 13 weeks worth of solid work in my life. Everything's a one-off for me, you know. So I'm just like, all of a sudden I feel more secure than I've ever felt in my life, you know. So after 13 weeks, the thing gets renewed for another 13 weeks, and I'm like, this can't be happening. I can't believe this, you know. And sure enough, you know, next thing you know, sponsors start coming in, big Budweiser and beers and cars and sponsors that are going to really support a show, because it started to really gain popularity. And next thing you know, you get a 3-year contract, which is beyond anything in my wildest dreams. And 33 1/3 years later, it just kept going, you know.
Did the money escalate it for you during that period as well?
Sure.
Could you say that again? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
He thought you said Siri.
Oh, well, no.
Go home.
They're listening to us, Big Brother.
Start that again, Joe.
Oh, hell, we'll leave it in, man.
Yes, Siri
Sir?
doesn't want me to talk about financial stuff.
So
yes, of course.
So it got more lucrative.
We got a chance to renegotiate contracts year after year. I mean, they were longer than a year. They were like become 5-year contracts, you know.
And so how did you handle session work with the show then?
I did the best I could, and the producers did the best they could to put up with me having to leave in the middle of, you know, having a big hole in my schedule in the middle of the day where I couldn't do anything. So which became kind of bothersome to say you're doing a session, you're in the middle of a really good momentum, and then, oh, I got to go, you know. And after a while, the patience wore thin for certain producers to hire me for daytime sessions, let's say. But I could still squeeze in some stuff in the morning and at night. But
So
I couldn't.
you kept doing sessions then, but
Yeah.
just not, you know.
But I couldn't, you know, everything had to be in New York, of course. I couldn't really leave town to do anything.
There was a time there, though, that you did try to do everything, didn't you? Take a red eye back from
Yes.
LA or whatever?
Well, I would actually, you know, after a while, it got to be, it was understood by Paul always that for me to come into the party and bring some energy, the energy that he wanted from me, I'd have to go out and get some. He understood that my life was about variety and doing a bunch of other things. So for that reason, he'd let me take some time off and get a substitute.
Oh.
You know, so there were moments where you can find reruns where it's like, it's either Francisco Centeno playing bass, or Neil Jason, or even the late great Jeff Lee Johnson, or sometimes Marcus Miller.
Yeah. So the life of a session musician, had the show got canceled and you had pulled yourself out of all those sessions that you were doing, and then the new kid in town shows up and that seat gets filled, was that a worry for you that by not doing these sessions that they may not come back to you if something happened to the show?
You know, foolishly enough, I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Because I always felt like I had enough work going on,
Yeah.
and I had enough contacts by that time, and had enough relationships and stuff. But who knows, you know, if it got down to it, maybe a tour would have come along or something.
I was told that by a lot of guys, especially out in LA, the wrecking crew guys said that, you know, if you got a call for a session, you took it. Because
Yeah, because
I was the guy that took this guy's place and ended up getting that spot, you know, and nothing is ever as easy as it looks from the outside, it seems like. You know, there's always a pitfall if you...
Well,
From
if
what
I
the
can
public
be totally honest about my naivete when I first came to New York City, which was to come there to join this band called Dreams. And it was a wonderful, wonderful band, but we lost our drummer, Billy Cobham, who went over to Mahavishnu Orchestra. And after that, we found it harder and harder to keep our momentum up, because the band was really, a lot of it was based around him playing and stuff. So after a while, we finally kind of started to fizzle. And to be honest, this is the most naive thing in the world, but I had never really heard of studio musicians. You know, I never thought about it. I was a big, I love listening to records, and I didn't really know about the workings of all that stuff. But I had gotten invited to come see some sessions go down by guys that were in that band, Dreams. And I'd look at this session and I would think, wow, that's the best job in the world. You walk in a room, you play a fresh piece of music with a fresh band of people, and you walk out. You never have to think about the song again. And then you go to the next one, and you get a fresh piece of music. You get to create a fresh part, and you get to just walk away from it and go to the next one. This is unbelievable.
Did you ever feel any pressure of having to come up with creating? I mean, because you are creating every time a new song comes on. You're creating something. Did you ever think, oh God, what am I going to play? I've already played everything, or did it just keep coming?
There have been times when it's hard to find the part, but if the drummer is at a certain caliber, my part becomes way easier, because all the whole task of being the groove, so to speak, is off my shoulders.
Yeah.
Because when the drummer lays it down in a certain way, sometimes you just go on automatic in a way.
Yeah.
Because everything's defined, and you're free to either say lock in and play downbeats with the bass drum, or play off the bass drum and not even play with the bass drum. Simple or complicated parts, busy or super simple. Seems like, in a way, everything works when the drums are really good, when the drums are really solid.
Well, bass and drums go together like
Birds of a
apple pie and ice cream, right? Yeah.
So,
Will, thank you so much,
man.
For coming in again. It's been 18 years since the first time, but we've seen each other many times. Actually, Will is a Musicians Hall of Fame inductee, 2014. He came in, we had great ZZ Top.
Randy Bachman was there?
It was a great year for Frampton, and that was a great night.
Double Trouble guys were there too.
Barbara Mandrell.
Oh my God.
Well, anyway, thanks again for coming in. See you next time on Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage.